It's been a wild past week, really past few weeks in recruiting. So I want to catch you all up to speed on recruiting storylines that I am following and what they could mean for the here and now, today, this fall, maybe because most recruiting classes, don't have more of an effect outside of maybe program momentum right now. You could say the here and now could even be extended into next season, but also what it could mean for the future of the schools I want to discuss with you. So Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, Nebraska, Baylor, Oklahoma, Texas, and Georgia specifically. It's a weird bunch of teams, but there are storylines with all of these teams that I am piqued by, that I'm intrigued with. So recruiting has been strange as well. So I don't really blame myself for bunching that really diverse and strange group of teams together. I really don't. I first and foremost want to start off talking about Baylor and Oklahoma, and I find that to be interesting because of the strong juxtaposition between these two teams. Before we resume this segment, please take a few seconds of your time to make sure you have liked the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and for any team podcasts and playlists linked in the description, and also comment your thoughts down below in the comment section and join my Discord server via the description. All of those things I just asked you to do are completely free, and they sign you up for things related to my channel, or they don't sign you up for anything. No cost to you, and all the benefit to you because we release daily college football content here on College Football with Sam. If you want to support the channel monetarily, sign up for a YouTube membership, or check any other links in the description for my merchandise store and Patreon page. Thank you very much, and let's get back to the segment. So, Baylor seems to be all in. Even with Dave Aranda and sort of the cloud around his tenure, it saved his job last year, but for how long? I think that he would have to go better than 8-5 to save his job in the long term. Oklahoma, meanwhile, is a much bigger brand than Baylor. Yes, they used to both be in the Big 12, but Oklahoma's a blue blood. Baylor is not. And yet Oklahoma and their general manager, Jim Nagy, seem to be upfront and honest with the fact that, yeah, they're not looking to exactly hammer the table with NIL and with recruiting the top players, who, of course, require top-end payments. And that's a very strong juxtaposition, especially because Oklahoma, I think, has been clearly backing Brent Venables, clearly, this preseason. When I look at these two classes, questions that I have for Baylor are they going to level up their talent? Is that their goal? And who can the Bears get in state? Because Texas is a deep state that cares a lot about high school football. You're not going to get all the good players in Texas even if you lock down the state, because there's just that many players, that many high schools. So what diamonds in the rough are there in Texas that Baylor can get? Or in the case of four-star defensive lineman Jamarian Carlton, can you just beat out Texas straight up for one of the top players in state? For Oklahoma, the concern isn't leveling up talent to pull away like Baylor. If Baylor levels up their talent, they're pulling away from the rest of the Big 12 minus the other Texas schools, honestly. Or, maybe Arizona State, maybe Utah or Colorado, depending on how their philosophies go in recruiting or the portal. For Oklahoma, they need to recruit better so that they can just catch up to the SEC. And they also need to make sure that they can continue to build that offense. I think Venables has done a good job of building the defense, but with the offense, we have seen injuries. We've seen transfer portal quarterbacks. We saw Jackson Arnold, who was recruited there, not work out. They need to be able to build this long term, because relying on the portal this much as they have entering 2025 is not a good long-term strategy, especially when you have 15 recruits, a recruiting class that's not even inside the top 30, and your recruiting average of an 88.72 average rank per player is the exact same basically as Baylor's, and they have 16 players. And all of Baylor's top players per 24/7 Sports, not the composite, which I used for the average player rankings, all of Baylor's top players, the top 3 ones, are all top 100. And I think only maybe 1 or 2 of Oklahoma's are. That's crazy. Baylor is out recruiting Oklahoma, and I think that is a storyline that people should be paying more attention to. Baylor's recruiting class, to their expectations, doesn't have much concerns. Just continue doing what you're doing. They have a phenomenal defensive line and wide receiver class, and they have one of the better offensive lines in the Big 12 right now. I mean, if they can pull this off and Aranda can show us that he can coach, my oh my, Baylor has, I think, quite the future in the Big 12. But for Oklahoma, I think things look bleak. And yes, they found Bo Bentley, could be their future QB, but Arnold had much more hype and a higher rating out of high school, at least in the current rankings. And look what he did. He's now the starting quarterback at Auburn, and I don't know how that's exactly going to pan out. So a strong juxtaposition there that I found to be very, very interesting. I want to then move on to not another juxtaposition, but just a storyline that I know I like, you guys like, my Big Ten followers, especially Ohio State and Michigan followers like, and the rest of the country I think is interested in. So Michigan and Ohio State both have lost momentum recently, but they were also at different points so hot that it was probably unsustainable. And they have great classes. Michigan's per 24/7 Sports composite is ranked 11th. Ohio State's is 7th. And Ohio State, I think, is about to refigure out the NIL game after it was, I was right on this, that the new rules were actually really stupid. They weren't going to hold up. They were a papier-mâché bomb shelter. And Ohio State finally figured that out because a nice article by Ross Dellinger reported that, hey, they're not going to challenge NIL collectives, the whole NIL Go thing. They're not going to. You just have to make the deals public, but they can't actually say, they can't really say no to them, essentially is what I got from that article and the whole conversation around that. So that's encouraging. And then for the Michigan side, the Wolverines have been recruiting better under Sharon Moore than they have under Harbaugh, and they have shown a willingness to go out and be a go-getter and buy players. Michigan needs to transform its receiver room. And whether or not they win or lose probably determines how well the class gels together and whether or not they stay. Those are the questions for Michigan. For Ohio State, it's the offensive line class is good, but I think some expected it to be even better. And this defensive line class is the third in a row that is pretty disappointing by Ohio State standards there. Pretty disappointing. I think Ohio State right now, as usual, is kind of wide receiver top heavy in the class, which has its own strengths and weaknesses. The strengths are no one has your receivers with rare exception, and really no one in the Big Ten except for Oregon and maybe USC. And if everything pans out for Penn State, maybe them, but that's unlikely. It takes a lot for everything to pan out. No one can really even compete with you this year and in the long term, and they're just competing. No one's going to surpass you. I mean, you're in your own tier at wide receiver. The drawback at that is that means you're taking away from other positions. So how do you balance that? That's a question for Ohio State. And will they pay to win? I kind of think they will and have to, but we don't know yet. I think that over the next few weeks and months, you'll see what happens. I don't have many concerns for either of these classes, if I'm being honest. Moving forward in the recruiting world, I'm a weird guy in the sense that I'm a Michigan fan who has an affinity for Ohio State's football team and program. I do not expect these teams to recruit at a top 3 level until there are actual rules in place, because I think that Texas, Oregon, and USC on an average basis can just outbid them to death. Michigan can probably play for an individual player or a handful of players here and there, but they do not have the overall recruiting staff that either of those 3 schools that I mentioned do. And it sounds like Michigan just has one super donor, Larry Ellison, who's not as involved as Phil Knight is in terms of football, from my understanding of things. Knight wants Oregon to win a title, and that's his passion. I don't quite know if Ellison is there just intuitively. And I think USC and Texas have more of a gang or cartel of donors that really allows them to just hit everyone at all different points. I don't think Michigan or Ohio State have that. But anywhere from that 4 to 10 range, that's doable. Michigan's close. Ohio State's there. And I think as long as they're not outside of the top 10 moving forward, if their staffs are good, then this isn't going to be much of a red flag, in my personal opinion. So I don't have many concerns about these classes right now. I think that Michigan's class, you'd like just a higher overall quality a little bit. And for Ohio State, you would want a better defensive line class. But at the same time, Ohio State's defensive line under the current recruiting will still have one of the not higher blue chip ratios, and they won't have many top 100 players, but they're recruiting well everywhere else, and Michigan's still recruiting well, just not quite the quality of Ohio State. Michigan's class is balanced. They could finish with the best D-line class. Ohio State has the best wide receiver class. I think that Chris Henry Jr. will probably finish as the best wide receiver of the 2026 class, and the O-line class is very impressive. I can tell you right now, I think that Sam Greer is going to follow Josh Simmons and Paris Johnson Jr. of being the next elite Ohio State offensive tackle. Both have average rank per recruits above 90. Michigan's is a 90.88. Ohio State's is a 92.35. And they both have 21 commits. And their best commits, their three best, are all inside the top 100. So Michigan and Ohio State battling out in recruiting. It's a little bit more competitive there than it used to be. You saw that with Michigan beating out Ohio State for, Carter Meadows, for example. Ohio State's still ahead there, but it's interesting to see that whether it's because of NIL or maybe Michigan's just actually winning on the field recently, that Michigan's recruiting at a slightly higher level than beforehand. And then due to, I think, NIL and Oregon being in the Big Ten and Texas existing and just more teams competing for that number one spot, it's harder for Ohio State to lock down a top 4, top 5 class than it used to be. I want to move on, though, and talk about Texas and Georgia. So Texas and Georgia, I think, have formed their own rivalry a bit over recruiting and also competitiveness and facing each other 2 times last year on the field. It's not the game. I mean, Michigan-Ohio State's the greatest rivalry in sports history, but this is an intense competitive rivalry, and this could succeed given that Sarkisian is a Saban disciple, Smart is a Saban disciple. There is an argument that these could be the 2 best programs in football moving forward. This could be the next Alabama-Georgia in terms of a highly competitive, vengeful, envious, competitive rivalry. And that is sort of where I see this right now. Both of these teams here, between Texas and Georgia, they admire each other. They're kind of jealous of each other. I think Georgia and Georgia fans are somewhat jealous that straight up Texas can pay more than them. Texas is out recruiting them right now on a quality basis from my perspective, and they also did last year. Georgia has beaten Texas twice. Georgia is the premier program, and Georgia kind of got away from Texas last year, where Texas should have won the SEC championship game based on yards and sustainable drives, and I think looking like the better team there, and they didn't have their quarterback injured, and then they shouldn't have allowed Georgia to just physically impose their will on them in Austin in October of 2024. So it's interesting. It's very fascinating. I like this, and I think that it is ultimately good for the sport. Both have an argument to finish with the number 1 class this year. The previous teams I've talked about, Baylor, Oklahoma, obviously not. I don't think Ohio State, without all of a sudden having the number 1 NIL collective, is going to, especially since their team is young, and I imagine they'll return a lot of guys for 2026 and have to pay them. Texas and Georgia have clearly shown they're willing to let juniors and redshirt sophomores and players who want to go to the draft just go. Ohio State wants to more often pay to keep them. And Michigan, I think, certainly will not get the number 1 class. Again, barring outspending everyone by several millions of dollars and being the Texas Tech of the Big Ten. Texas and Georgia, though, they can finish with the number 1 class. Texas is 4 5-stars and will probably finish with more. Georgia has 30 commits with an average player rank per recruit that is comparable with Ohio State's and USC's. So you get the point there. I don't have any concerns about either of these classes. Georgia doesn't recruit wide receiver well. This has been reflected in this class, but they haven't done that anyway, and I think they have a good portal wide receiver class. And you know what? If Georgia is this team from here on out who basically uses the portal for wide receiver because wide receivers are in such great supply, the good ones at least, aliens are always aliens and rare, that they're willing to overspend in the portal for proven wide receiver talent, and they have some good commits too, and enrollees and players already talented in that room. So maybe this is also just a weak cycle for wide receivers for Georgia, and they'll bounce back the following year. For Texas, I have absolutely no concerns about this class. I think that if you didn't count the special teams commits, if they didn't weigh down the average because special teamers can never be higher than a 3-star, they would have the best overall class right now. I mean, they have Diabell, 5-star, Tyler Atkinson, 5-star at linebacker, 5-star athlete Jermaine Bishop, and 4-star defensive end Richard Wesley. All of them are top 50. In fact, all of them are top 30. They have a few more top 50 commits. And for Georgia, 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis, 4-star offensive tackle Akini Ogboko, 4-star tight end Caden Protho, and 4-star D lineman Valdon Sone. All of them are inside the top 50. I mean, these classes they're very impactful. And I imagine Texas will get some flips now that they've been given the green light by NIL Go and the CSC to really spend whatever you want to spend, because we all know Texas is a massive budget. I imagine they'll get some flips in their favor, and I think Georgia's looking to add some more players if possible. Think about this. Georgia was in the running for Tyler Atkinson and some other players, like some top-end players. They missed out on a lot of them, and yet they still have the number 2 recruiting class. That's pretty impressive in my mind. And if you're a Georgia fan, if you're a Georgia staffer, Georgia staffers won't listen to this show, but still, you should be proud of that. And as for Texas, they, I think, are on the clear path to have the number 1 overall roster in terms of recruiting talent over the next 2 or 3 years. And last but not least, I want to discuss just briefly 2 Big Ten classes who I think are on the rise. They are Nebraska and Oregon. Nebraska, for a minute there, was sitting outside of, I think, even the top 80 in recruiting. They're now inside the top 70. I think that this is a team that will get some late flips. If they have the season that I believe Rule and his staff expect them to have, then at the end of the day, they will get several flips and finish with probably a top 25, top 30 caliber class. That's a question, though. Are recruits waiting for wins? Because then that puts more pressure on the team. And can they level up their talent? Because Nebraska already has had, on average, top 25 talent. You probably want to start recruiting inside the top 20 or even top 15 if you want to long-term have the goal of winning the Big Ten and winning a playoff game, not just getting back to the playoffs. Quarterback is questionable in this class. I think they have a solid offensive line class, though, and Danny Odom is a top 100 overall player at corner, so that's great. As for Oregon, I more so want to focus on Oregon, and the fact that the Ducks probably won't sign the number 1 overall class because they're small right now. They only have 15 commits, but they have an average player rating of a 93.77 with 2 5-stars, 11 4-stars, and 2 3-stars. And Jet Washington, Emmanuel Iheanacho, and Jalen Lott, their top 3 players, are all top 50. It's a class that I think has a higher quality player than even Texas or any of the other teams in the top. It's just small, a lot like last year's class. Is their current strategy sustainable in regards to NIL, especially since USC has been willing to get more commits in the California area, target that more, and kind of lock it down? That is a question, but I think it is, because I think Oregon recruits nationally. Emmanuel Iheanacho is from Maryland. Penn State's closer. Penn State, I think, has a knack for developing offensive tackles. Look at Olu Fashanu and their current tackle class. And yet they got him. So I think Oregon can recruit at a national level. And if they sign the number 1 quality class again, we're living in a world where Oregon and Texas, and not Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia. So the top 4 programs of 5 years ago were Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, was those 4. If Oregon signs a number 1 quality class again, and Texas continues to do what they are doing, where they've gained massive momentum and are well ahead of their usual schedule of earning commits, we could be living in a world where Oregon and Texas, who 5 years ago no one thought were top 10 programs at the time. Texas, everyone thought of the potential, but Oregon, not everyone exactly thought that. To now, they might be the top 2 teams in terms of recruiting talent and recruiting prowess. That's pretty crazy. Those are my recruiting storylines as of the month of July for 2025. And I think that a lot of these teams, they are either under pressure, competitive pressure, in the case of Oklahoma, job security pressure, same with Baylor. Again, it's a weird group of teams, but hey, recruiting is weird, especially now in the NIL and transfer portal era. It's just facts. Thank you for watching College Football with Sam. Make sure that you've liked the video, subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and team playlists and podcasts in the description, joined the free Discord server where we talk college football 24/7, and have commented your thoughts down below. Check out the description for any ways you can support the channel monetarily. Everything else I've asked you to do is completely free, and your support means the world to me. We're trying to become the next big thing on college football YouTube. 6-figure subscribers, maybe 1 million one day. I think we can do that. And also check out any videos or playlists, anything in these columns right here, where there will be videos and playlists. Yeah, you get the point. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.